Hi, I am Pratim Ranjan Bose. You are watching my podcast show presented by Iravati Research and Communication Centre, or IRCC. Today's topic is financing energy transition. I have with me two distinguished guests from Ashoka Centre for People-centric Energy Transition, or ACPET, in Ashoka University. Professor Anandajit Goswami is an economist with a PhD degree in energy policy. He has vast experience in academics, project implementation, and helping governments in formulating right policies. Animesh Ghosh is a senior research associate with ACPET. An engineer by training, he has vast experience in working in the social sector and worked with the governments in various capacities. Welcome to you, Animesh and Anandajit.
Thank you.
Before we start this discussion, here are some key pointers. India's energy sector has undergone dramatic changes over the last 15 years and will undergo further changes over the next decade. The change is all pervasive. Both supply and demand profile have undergone complete change. For example, railways was predominantly run by diesel. It is now getting fully electrified. There are many such examples, but in this episode, we will focus on transition in the electricity sector, which has witnessed three major changes in last 15 years. First, the thermal generation capacity has doubled between 2007 and 2014. This has removed the supply deficit entirely. Thermal is the base power, so this will come back to our discussion time and again. Second, rural electrification peaked and is nearly completed. Share of electrified households increased from 67% in 2011 to 99.9%, thereby expanding the household consumption. And third, the share of solar in electricity generation, which was barely there, below around 0.5% in 2014, is now 6.5%. Rich America and richer China has 5% solar mix. That takes us to the crucial issue of finance. Before we get into the core discussion, I'll ask Animesh to quickly explain what is ACPET's work area. Over to you, Animesh.
Thank you. So the center, which is apparently located within Ashoka University, we are basically known as Ashoka Centre for a People-centric Energy Transition. The vision of the center was, or rather is, to be a world-class knowledge institution in support of economic growth, energy security, and net zero ambitions of India and developing South. The major objectives of our center is to become a central knowledge hub on integrated energy matters, then developing concept and business models for sustainable energy transition in India and beyond India, that is the global South that we are focusing on, and then collaborate through partnerships with industry, government, and academia. And the third important component here is that is advanced education and research on energy transition and energy security. So these are the main focus areas for People-centric Energy Transition Center of Ashoka.
Thank you. Anandajit, you have vast experience in the sector. Now, we all know energy transition is costly because it leads to the idling of energy infrastructure that was built at great cost. It means consumers should pay for more quality supply. Unfortunately, that's not happening in India. On the one hand, the tariff structure is highly distorted and is out of place. Secondly, there is a political rush to offer free or subsidized electricity to the domestic sector and agriculture. Overall, it drilled anywhere between $80 to $90 billion hole finance gap in the system. How can we meet both ends, energy transition and ensuring good finance?
I think, thank you, Mr. Bose, for inviting me in this very relevant topic and podcast. And thank you, Animesh, for the wonderful introduction. I think in terms of the word that you used, good finance, it will be more, I think, responsible finance, because I think power sector needs to come into a transition point where responsibility now comes in, accountability has to set in. When I say accountability, that accountability is a function of efficiency. In finance, when we started our earlier work in 2002, 3, 4, in power sector finance, we used to do very simple calculations of debt equity structure, what is the basic IRR, what should be the rate of return. So if you go by those paradigms, you clearly see that the sector has diverted more, and they're not aligning to those IRR and the regulatory asset goals, which were set up for the power sector. Now, one point is that we need to take some bold measures and steps. So time has come now where we need to restructure our regulatory assets. We need to reform the discom sector. Generation has had seen reforms. Transmission sector also has seen reforms. We started in 1991, the power sector reform, and we all know between 1994 to 97, Odisha was the first state which reformed and created three segments.
Unbundling.
Transmission. Unbundling started in Odisha, and some of us were involved in then created the State Electricity Regulatory Commission. So we used to do the tariff petitioning. What we realized when we were walking through those spreadsheet and Excel sheets of the entire tariff structures of each of these state companies, we clearly saw that nowhere the cost is also measuring the functional efficiency. See, before we started the podcast, we were discussing that most of the people in this country think energy and electricity on the same word and the equivalent way. It's completely different. So the moment you see electricity as energy, or the moment you see electricity as a commodity, your functional frame of bringing finance, how you will finance the sector also changes. Okay, so when you consider IRR as your frame of referencing, then IRR is balanced with the debt and equity structure, where we generally take for the cost of capital, where we add an uncertainty risk element in equity amount. But if you ask me personally, because electricity is a political economy, and because electricity has a larger economic and development dividend, generally financing should not take into account of an IRR frame, but rather an ERR frame, economic rate of return.
I have a question. I have a question here. I mean, let us take it to more, in terms of common that common person or common people do understand. Investors came in and invested in large quantities in thermal sector, right? They should get their return. And that is also a political economy, because if investor is injured, then there will not be many more investors. And we are not seeing investors really. The solar sector is government purchase guaranteed kind of stuff. So it is, financed. This is a completely different segment. But we saw private investment in thermal generation. They didn't get the return. We are not seeing any further. So my question here is that how can you meet both ends? We have to ensure that we are protecting the interest of the investors, because going forward, government cannot keep financing this sector.
I agree with you. And that's where I'm saying that it needs to initially start to bring in an efficiency framework where we take care of the investor from an IRR perspective, which is the internal rate of return, which is only on the cost of supplying provision, taking into account of debt and equity. But because energy is also a political commodity, in the long term, only taking care of the investor will not balance the larger societal goals, because you told about balancing the both. So somewhere we have to transit from IRR frame to ERR frame, where after taking care of, say, if someone has put in 100 rupees of money, if we take, let's take an example. green financing amount, people are saying it will finally lead to $5 to $7 trillion. Some people have estimated 200 billion, but no one says, what is this 200 billion? Is this 200 billion an amount of only getting a rate of return on what? First, that has to be defined. Return is only not on putting the money, just only the money. If that is what we ensure first through a proper cost plus pricing regime, we used to do multi-year tariff. You are aware of that, why multi-year tariff came in the power sector, because we always used to consider this 5-year multi-year tariff frame only to give a positive and to get a confidence to the investor. We had tried that in several states also, but then that also failed because the regulatory assets piled up and investors started to back away, as you are rightly mentioning.
Market instruments are failing
But
because you didn't give market a chance in the entire sector. Whether it is
agreed.
generation.
Agreed.
When you are saying, I do agree. See, India has a goal as a poor country with only 2,500 at current prices per capita. So we have to ensuring supply of cheap electricity is a just goal. This is a just goal. The question is here with whether we are working for that one. Two, how to do that. If you want it at the cost of the investor, then it is not going to work, because personally, you or me, when we invest, that decision is fully based on the return. And then you have to spend your money somewhere, judiciously. So whether we are doing that,
I think if you ask me, I will rather give a much more revolutionary option in this case. I think we need a kind of an act like Electricity Act 2003 is done, reforms that was supposed to be done. We now need to also have a new act in place through which, because see, in a country like India, sometimes the command and control measures need to come, because you know how people and states and electoral economics and function when it comes to electricity. So unless and until you keep a law-driven massive change to bring a reform, I don't think this chicken and egg situation will be going to be solved ever. And somewhere we now, as I am saying again and again, the time has come to call a spade a spade. So if you have to, because no one assumed before Electricity Act 2003 that something like that can come up. So history has told us that Electricity Act 2003 was possible. If that is possible, let's in 2023, it's 2024 now, and more than 20 years now. Time has come to now change many of those provisions in the Act and relook and redefine. I mean, I personally think that time has come where
very rightly put.
Surely need to be.
Very rightly put. Electricity Act 2003 came at a time when India was a deficit economy. Today we are a surplus economy. And today there was no concept of transition in those days. There was no concept of transition in those days. So you worked on 85% plant utilization. Okay. Today, plant utilization should not be a factor if you want to offer 24/7 electricity, right? So the whole sector should undergo reforms, and it is very, very long pending for such a dynamic sector, which has witnessed maximum change in the last 20 years, and that has not undergone reforms, tells the story that there is a serious mismatch in the system. So with that, let me go to Animesh. Animesh, agriculture has been enjoying free or cheap electricity for quite some time. We all know that. I think around 2000, 2001, it became a very major political issue. It started with Madhya Pradesh. Now, replacing grid electricity in agriculture by solar or using solar electricity, such a high mix of 6.5% for agriculture is a very good idea. We have tried both. We brought in PM-KUSUM, which would help us to save investment in grid and replace the agriculture demand by solar directly. It's a solar pump scheme. And then very recently, just in February, the ministry issued a directive. Some states are already doing it. Ministry issued a directive to states to shift agriculture load to solar hours. Okay, so this will also help us in in even getting the peak, the evening peak can be a little more flattened. But how is the implementation of these schemes, PM-KUSUM in particular? You have been working, I think you have more knowledge on that.
Right. Thank you for that question. So, like going by the scheme PM-KUSUM, you have rightly pointed out there are lots of weightage that has been given towards catering the requirement of the farmers on the ground, and the scheme clearly includes all sets of farmers. All sets of farmers. I meant to say a farmer who is willing to introduce solar-based grid at the farmland, and like willing to use the grid solar-based electricity for the irrigation purpose. That is number one. Number two, the farmers who are currently using the diesel operated or like
Yes,
fossil fuel operated.
that's the wider advantage of solar pumps.
Exactly. And the third category is the farmers who are currently connected with the main grid and irrigating their land. So all three categories have been included within the PM-KUSUM. That is the best part of it. However, if you look at the even at the government website also, you will find that the conversion rate means the number of plants. If I can take the first category, that is the farmers who are willing to install a new plant. So that is the first category. If I look at that category, the conversion rate of number of proposals that has been accepted and the number of plants which has actually been installed on ground, that percentage is just 3.4%, 447% at this point of time.
Okay.
So
only 3.47% of the pumps allotted have come on ground.
Exactly. So there is a mismatch, or there is a huge mismatch, I'll say, between
not mismatch. We can clearly say that policy hasn't made any headway.
Yes. So this is number one. I'm talking about the first category. Now come to the second category, the B category, the farmers who were
Replacing
using
diesel.
diesel. Yes. So that category, we can see that the conversion rate is slightly better. It is in double digits. That is around 23% at this point of time. Now, the third category, that is connecting the people who are connected with the main grid, and then will be shifting towards the solar pumps. So that is the third category. So I'll move to that category after some time, after maybe a couple of minutes. So let me touch upon the first two categories. So the schemes are clearly defined. There is a guideline. Everything is there. However, at the grassroots, the current scenario says that the entire scheme is a demand-driven scheme. Okay, so firstly, the farmers needs to know or needs to be aware about the guidelines of the scheme. So perhaps at this point of time, what is reflected from the grassroots is that there is a missing link in that. The second part here is like handling the technicalities of availing that scheme. That is number one. Number two is that the other technical component, which is technically executing that project at the grassroots. So these two technical components.
I think solar pumps are also a little different than the diesel pumps.
Right. So here we are mostly talking
so
of
we need that
7.5
support system on ground.
Exactly. 7.5 horsepower pumps are to be installed in this particular scheme. However, what the administrative technicalities, or what are the papers that needs to be there to avail this particular scheme, how to fill these forms, and how to approach the local administration. So there might be a necessity of a facilitator or a facilitating organizations to handhold these farmers to that extent. Number two is like when I'm
Animesh,
talking
I have
about
a question. Animesh, I have a question. See, we
Right.
are probably making a simple thing very complex. Let us
Okay.
look at e-scooter.
Right.
Roughly third of these scooters, that is two-wheelers, that is sold in the country are now EVs, right? So we have given subsidies at the right point at the producer end, and people are
Right.
buying it because they see the economic reason behind it, right? So here are two
Right.
things. One is where you are giving your subsidy. If
Right.
you are giving it at the producer end, then the market price can exist at the market end. Two, if I mean, why you have to have sufficient economic triggers. Now, say for example, if electricity is available in grid at free of cost, for example, in Madhya Pradesh and many other places, right? Are farmers switching to solar pump? And
Right.
why can't we make the subsidy system simple?
See, so once again, there is a catch in this entire scheme, PM-KUSUM also. There is a component. That's why I told that let me go to the third component afterward. The third component, which caters these farmers who are connected to the main grid, and you are rightly pointed out, if they are availing the electricity at say free of cost, what is the reason to switch to solar grids? There can be a reason, because there is an incentive lies in that in that game. So that incentive is around, I think, 0.40 paisa per kilowatt is the per unit 0.40 paisa per unit is the equation. Okay, so the discom who is providing
So
that
if the
service, and
electricity, I don't understand, please explain it. If 0.47 paisa, or what you are saying, or 4 rupees 47 paisa,
40 paisa per
40
unit.
paisa per unit savings.
Yes. So
Or
40 paisa
at
per unit not
what
saving.
cutoff price for electricity? Grid
No, no.
electricity.
So as you were saying that it is currently in MP, it is the farmers are getting electricity at free of cost to the farmers. So
Free of
if
cost or
this
50 paisa, something like that. Yeah.
yes, so now after using the electricity for irrigation, if they can save something, that save electricity can be fed to the main grid, and that the main grid is going to purchase it at 40 paisa per
Okay. So
unit.
okay. So
So there is a catch. Yes. So
this
there
is
is a
gross
reason
metering
that
or net metering? It is net metering.
it is net metering. So
Okay.
they have to be moving towards net metering also. So,
Okay.
so, so there is a reason why they will like to move towards solar grid. But for that, they need to understand these technical complexities or say nitty-gritties
So
of
your
this
point,
scheme.
if I understand you correctly, if we can remove these all complexities of form fill up at the user end, this can be more popular. I mean, if
I'm
we
not
can
saying
make it as simple
I'm
as
not.
buying an EV scooter, then people will buy it. That is what, are you trying
See,
to tell that?
exactly. I am trying to say that there needs to be a solution. The scheme is I believe that rightly designed. Now the execution, there has to be a focus at the execution level. For execution level, there might be a requirement of a facilitator who can play this role of easing these things, and the policy execution point needs to be eased further, and farmer avails it smoothly, not getting into the complexities of how to do it, whom to approach, how to approach, and all these things.
So we are coming to that economic trigger in solar. So you say that there is an economic trigger, but this is not the user part is a problem. Anandajit, the last question. Rooftop has been the guiding force of transition in rich economies. The larger the consumer, more the benefit. Because consumers, the domestic segment has been is charged at a far higher rate in when compared to industry, commercial, etc. in those countries. In India, that situation is completely different. Rather, it is absent, that trigger. Those in the household segment, 10 to 15% are highly charged. They want to move, but discoms are artificially trying to hold them back. And the rest have very little reason. Now, we discussed about the need for the reforms and etc. in the electricity sector. Very recently, we saw two schemes. One is a scheme, other is a regulatory change. On the scheme side, the Surjodaya scheme brought in by the in February, that is aiming to offer solar panels to small consumers. 10 million solar panels, 10 million consumers they would like to target. As far as I read the scheme, it is a small, mostly small or basically poor people. And on the other hand, there is a recent regulatory amendment that lifted the caps artificially created on the larger consumers, household consumers, for that they were not allowed to move to rooftop, so that those restrictions are relaxed or removed. Isn't it contradictory? I mean, why are we, if we want solar transition, then why are not we simply allowing the larger consumer to move, who has an economic reason to move? Why are we trying to invest on people who has very little economic reason for switching to solar? Is it just to create a kind of awareness? Is it kind of an advertisement? What it is?
I will be very honest to you. I don't know whether some people will shoot mud at me. Good economics, bad politics. Hayek had said that. So when we see the power sector from a good economics, good politics, it has never happened. So in terms of what you said, ideally, economic principle says that a consumer who is willing to shift, that consumer should be allowed to do that. And you allow that consumer to have a free space. So for instance, let me give you an example. In India Habitat Center, long time back, in between 2010 to 12, I was personally involved in calculating about the net metering and if India Habitat Center could be allowed to gradually transit in the central Delhi towards a solar transition, and we used almost the entire roof panel. But then DERC came in, as you said, the discoms came in and they started to put certain restrictions, certain regulatory mechanisms came in, which
in fact, did
hindered
they
that.
allow net metering in India? They didn't allow net metering. They were offering gross metering.
They didn't. So because that's what I'm saying. The economic principle pushed that we pushed at that point of time. At that point of time, Dr. Pachuri was there, and I remember he was aggressively pushing about this case. The buildings like India Habitat Center should be allowed because consumers who are ready to shift should be allowed. They should pay, and gradually the transition will percolate down. If the upper class has the capacity, willingness, and capability, you allow that class to shift, and gradually it will percolate down, because you, in a society like India, where, as I'm saying again and again, power is both a commodity and an energy and a societal investment, all three at the same time, you cannot expect an economic principle will hit equally all the three layers. So it has to be gradual, it has to be differentiated.